Well, folks, uh, it is over. OVAH, over. As Zohran Mamdani, the underdog, or previously seen as underdog, at least when he started his campaign um, last year in 2024, around October, I want to say. But Zohran Mamdani is now the presumptive mayor of New York. Um, Presumptive because New York votes as a Democratic city most of the time. Occasionally they elect independents, but more on that later. Uh, New York mayors are usually Democrats. Zohran Mamdani just won the Democratic primary, which means, again, most likely, he's going to have access to the Democratic Party machine, the infrastructure, the banner, the label, to the extent that that still gets you credibility in the city. All of that is going to be with Zohran Mamdani's access. But interestingly, much like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democrats are being forced to do this. Zohran Mamdani is not the Democrats' first option. Andrew Cuomo did not win. Brad Lander did not win. And there's a lot to learn from this race. And there are people who are already freaking out about this. Thankfully, it's mostly the right people. But I really wanted to get to, in this video, in this quick little detour here, three big learnings from Zohran Mamdani's win. Now, I just happen to be in New York right now, in Brooklyn. I've been walking around the streets, kind of bringing up the political conversation, not bringing it up and having it brought up to me, seeing posters and bodegas and barbershops, hearing people play dominoes, talking on the street. There's a funny video I have that unfortunately I can't play for you right now of what appeared to be a paid Cuomo bus of people dancing to like West Indian music saying vote Cuomo for president. Someone slipped up and said Cuomo for president, even though technically he's running for mayor. We all know his ambitions. And ultimately, despite all of that entrenched name recognition, despite the party politics that he plays, despite the sometimes shisty things that he's been reported to have done behind the scenes, Mamdani was able to supersede that in a number of ways that I want people to recognize here. So first, number one, like I said, there's going to be three things here, and I kind of lied because this first one's a little bit of a bonus, but take that in. I know there's a lot of people who watch this show who are on the left, who are progressive, who just consider themselves, maybe they don't label themselves, but they see this to be a very difficult time in America. And as we did previously on Power Report episodes, sometimes if you're not in New York, for example, if you're not in a certain area where local politics is happening, it can feel a little bit distant, or you're not sure exactly what's going on, or you're wondering, what are the ramifications for you? Like, so what? Why does it matter to me if I'm living in Philadelphia or Miami or Raleigh, North Carolina, or San Luis Obispo, California? Why does the New York race matter to me? And I do want to sit on that for a lot of people who are consuming politics online the main way many people in this generation do, this is a sigh of relief. This is the first bit of good news anywhere in a long time. Now, I still think there's been nuggets of good news. The resistance that you've seen to the Trump administration that has taken on in many forms, whether it's resistance to Elon Musk and Doge, resistance to ICE and all of these raids that are happening where Trump is sending in the National Guard and trying to weaponize different militarized police forces within our society, branches within our society, in order to kidnap neighbors, community members. The resistance to that has also been, modestly good news. But of course, it's always in resistance to something that is terrible, horrible, no good, very bad fascist. This case, this is an electoral win. Let's take that in. We don't get these wins that often. This is good. I'm happy for us. Really am. Especially I'm happy for all the work that's been done. Zohran Mamdani ran a long game campaign. This was not, like a snap of the moment type thing. This was thoughtful. It was methodical. It was have a message, do that message on the streets, get it out into social media, which is why I think a lot of people were interfacing with his campaign, especially near the end. And the endorsements came in at the right time, the attention came in at the right time, so that he could have this sort of bull in a china shop moment to surprise people, the same way AOC surprised Joe Crowley when she won her primary and ultimately went on to win her general election in I forget honestly when that was at this point, but when she won her first term in her seat. So despite $25 million more in PAC funding, somewhere around that number, which is the number that Andrew Cuomo got more than Zohran Mamdani's total spending. A lot of Zohran's spending was grassroots, plus the matching that mayoral candidates get in New York. There's a point where Zohran was telling people to stop donating because the effort was better spent on knocking on doors, on canvassing, on actually getting the word out organically, versus raising money to shower on advertisements during the last weeks of the campaign, which didn't work. And boy, were there a lot of Cuomo advertisements. They're all over TV. They're all over my YouTube. Once my phone realized that I was in the New York area, I started getting ads for Cuomo all of a sudden. The ads are all over these bus stops and subway stations. They have these digital signs all over New York City and the boroughs, and they have Cuomo's works for you. Cuomo's going to raise the minimum wage. Cuomo's for unions. There are all these things that should have appealed to a left-wing sort of idea. And so they were digging on that low name recognition. They spent $25 million more, $25 million more on a primary campaign backed by Mike Bloomberg, backed by a number of different rich New Yorkers, people who, I think Mike Bloomberg has the quote where he sees New York as a luxury good or luxury commodity. And that is so separate to Zohran Mamdani and frankly, most of the other candidates who are saying they wanted a New York for all New Yorkers who are born in the city, New Yorkers who are as new as I am to the city, young, old, LGBTQ plus, cis, whatever race you are, whatever religion you are, whatever practices you have, whatever opinions you have, frankly, Democrat or Republican, you deserve a chance to live in the city and prosper in the city, and for your neighbors to deserve a similar chance as well. Those are such different campaigns that Zohran was running compared to Cuomo. I almost Freudian slipped and said Bloomberg, but those are a really big difference. And so that's lesson number one. We want to take that in. And in fact, I want to play a little bit of Zohran's acceptance speech because I think you can kind of see that contrast and why he won if we play a little bit of that here. So let's do that.
Let me close with this. In these dark times, I know that it is harder than ever to keep faith in our democracy. It has been attacked by billionaires and their big spending, by elected officials who care more about self-enrichment than the public trust, and by authoritarian leaders who rule through fear. But above all, our democracy has been attacked from within. For too long, New Yorkers have strained to find a leader who represents us, who puts us first. And we have been betrayed time and again. After so many disappointments, the heart hardens. Belief becomes elusive. And when we no longer believe in our democracy, it only becomes easier for people like Donald Trump to convince us of his worth. For billionaires to convince us that they must always lead. As FDR said, democracy has disappeared in several other great nations, not because the people disliked democracy, but because they had grown tired of unemployment and insecurity, of seeing their children hungry while they sat helpless in the face of government confusion and weakness. In desperation, they chose to sacrifice liberty in the hope of getting something to eat. New York, if we have made one thing clear over these past months, it is that we need not choose between the two.
That's an amazing point right there. He is drawing a difference. You know, he has compared Cuomo to Trump in a lot of different ways during this. And he's taking the high road and choosing not to draw those comparisons too much tonight. Cuomo conceded really early on in the race. We thought it'd be closer. We thought you'd have to go through a number of ranks or a number of rounds of ranked choice voting, which we'll get to in just a moment. But it turned out that Zohran's lead was so strong in the first round of voting. So you can almost think of that as just a regular poll, or a regular actual election. He was so strong in the first round that once you did the redistribution of the candidates who didn't get as many votes, it was conventional wisdom by everyone, by the left, by everyone, that it was going to, like, people's ranks were probably not going to lean towards Cuomo. If they're already not voting for Cuomo, then the rank anyone but Cuomo sort of theme was probably going to win, especially with Brad Lander being third place, and Brad Lander and Zohran Mamdani showing really good unity there near the end of the race. More on that in a moment. But this dichotomy between Donald Trump and the way he rises to power through this mix of people no longer believing that politics, democracy, their country, the republic, whatever you want to call it, people no longer believe that works for them. That combination, combined with people's material conditions, not being able to eat, getting on the subway and going, oh, damn, that's another $3. I'm gonna have to take $3 to get back. And that's gonna be, half of a lunch that I may need to have. That's gonna be half of a meal that I may need to provide. And now I have to figure out how to get that $6 somewhere else. We have New Yorkers thinking about that in proximity to, let's be clear, New York is home to some of the wealthiest companies, boards, groups, individuals, not just in the United States, but in the world. When you have this dichotomy of separation of okay, you all use the same services, you all use the same land, the same sort of, space around New York City. We all want the same things. We all want just bare survival and a chance to improve our conditions. And a lot of people, billionaires or these big corporations, are well near there and have been benefiting from the environment of New York and will continue to benefit from the environment of New York. But they've done so for too long. And the downside for that has been increased impoverishment in New York City. And it's a trend that you see across the country, from Nebraska, Colorado. I just went around there across the country, and I'll explain that in another detour. But even where I'm more based and where I'm from in Los Angeles, you see wealthier people, sometimes people who are out of town, sometimes people who grew up there their whole life. They're not just, keeping them wealth themselves and hiding out in the hills. They're buying up property in places that are becoming trendy because of Kendrick Lamar videos. And they're displacing families who are working class, who are barely scraping by. And they're not even able to live in the city that they grew up in anymore. This is happening in Los Angeles. It's happening in New York. It's happening in Chicago. It's happening in Miami, and Atlanta, and Columbus, Ohio, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in Denver, Colorado. It's happening everywhere in this country. And it's happening in a lot of places around the world too. And the answer for so many people, when their politics isn't working for them and they can't get things to eat, is to go for the strongman authoritarian who promises they'll fix it by blaming something that doesn't even have to do with the problem. Immigrants doing crime, not waiting outside Home Depot for a day's work. Socialists taking money and taking jobs when actually they're looking at programs that were done under liberal and conservative administrations, advice taken from those different parts of the government, parts of learning, and then developing that into a strategy. So Zohran moving beyond all these buzzwords is really good to see.
We can be free and we can be fed.
We can be free and fed. That's great.
We can demand what we deserve. And together we have built a movement where everyday New Yorkers recognize themselves in our vision of democracy. Every new voter registered, that is faith renewed. Every voter who traveled through withering heat to the polls, that is faith renewed. And every New Yorker who sees solutions to the daily challenges they face in this campaign, that is faith renewed.
And that's another great thing there. I'll end this here because that turned out to not be the conclusion of his speech. It went on for another 10 minutes or so. But you know what? God bless Zohran. He gets it in this one. there's been such an argument, especially in the videos with Cenk and Anna that I've done recently, the different interviews and segments that they've done. The only reason I'll keep bringing it up is because it is a useful way to describe their failing strategy of expanding the base of people who will vote for progressives or the left or however you want to call that, expanding that base by looking to MAGA and looking towards Republicans and looking towards people who have been voting in previous elections. They've been going, Biden, Trump, Romney, Obama, like they've been ping-ponging here. When you have an even stronger majority of people, I think an easier to convince majority of people, or maybe not a majority or a plurality, but like a very large amount of people. You can check this from the 2024 election results. A lot of people just didn't vote. A lot of people have given up on the system. A lot of people don't believe that neither of the two major parties can do anything for them, Democrat or Republican. This has been a generational belief for working class people of all races, of all representations, of all expressions, all gender. Like, this has been a common thing that Democrats, Republicans, left-wing, right-wing, same bird. And there's a bunch of nuance within that. I think a better apt phrase is Republicans hate you and Democrats fail you. But even if you take that little bit of nuance I just gave of Republicans being actively vindictive and Democrats, failing the rest of the voters, but also trying to be more actively vindictive towards the electorate to get votes. People got hope in Zohran's campaign because Zohran wasn't appealing to right-wing votes. He was appealing to people who had given up in the political process entirely, and he was offering something entirely different and bringing it to people in a way they couldn't ignore because it was on social media. Bring it to voters in a way they couldn't ignore because it was a grassroots campaign. I want to shout out DSA for that. DSA is a mess in a number of other different ways, especially in major cities. It's a lot of I won't say like the same leftist infighting you see online, but you put a bunch of leftists in a room together, you rarely get agreements coming out of it. But you have to thank DSA for their incredible ground game, their incredible movement, their incredible push into parts of the 5 boroughs that frankly are usually not conducive to someone like Zohran running or someone like a socialist running. I was hearing one podcast, and I forget exactly who it was coming from, where there's a black man who was saying, yeah, there was an older guy in the barbershop who was saying, I'm kind of into this Zohran guy. But he was saying it under hushed tones, like he didn't want people to know. And that is a common thing in a lot of different spaces, in a lot of different communities, where it is so common to support the rank and file Democrat, which would have been Andrew Cuomo in this case. Hell, it would have been Eric Adams a moment ago, right? Before even he became too Trumpy. But usually, especially among older left bases, or older like Democratic Party bases, especially groups of color, Black, brown, they tend to be more conservative. And so if they go for a Democrat, they'll go for the older Democrat, the one they trust, the one they've seen their name on signs for a while. And you were getting some old heads. And I was even noticing this as well. I was, soft polling some old heads very anecdotally. And they're like, yeah, I'm kind of for Zohran, but don't say that too loud because we need to normalize new ideas. We need to normalize, like, democratic socialism should not be scary. You have democratic socialist neighbors, and they're the ones who are actually standing up for you when Democrats lie to you and Republicans try to make your life harder. It's a simple message. And when you look at the map, for folks who are not from New York, this may not mean all that much, but from my limited amount of understanding in New York, I can tell you from just looking at this poll here that let's take Manhattan, for example, because I think that's like an easy case to look at. You'll see it's mostly yellow around the edges, and that's for Zohran. The blue all around Central Park is for Cuomo, and that's where all the billionaires live. This area below Central Park right here, and it isn't even strong Cuomo, but for the extent it was. But this area around Central Park, they call it Billionaires Row. I'll repeat that. The area around Central Park, they call Billionaires Row. Now, this isn't the whole thing. There's not many places in the Bronx right here that are called Billionaires Row, right? There are not many places in South Brooklyn down here that are called Billionaires Row, right? But other than the places where you have a huge concentration of wealth in the five boroughs, and that would definitely be Manhattan and Manhattan. I will say there are definitely some wealthy areas of Brooklyn as well, but I don't think they're that representative of the map. And also, I don't think I have enough street cred around here to be able to describe that to you here. I've been a New Yorker officially, maybe I'm not even one yet. But the trend is that it's either wealthier people or families who have like voted Democrat for a while. They're older. Gentrification hasn't hit all these areas yet. There's a lot of families who, might be preoccupied with politics, might be older and are like hanging on to their houses, and they are afraid of some, new scary socialists, a thing they've heard from other Democrats coming onto the scene and messing up the game for them. They just haven't heard that much. And thankfully, in a lot of areas where you do have longtime residents, like definitely this east area of Brooklyn, but definitely a lot of transplants here, people who are from around all parts of the world, but also a lot of people who are younger, upwardly mobile from the city of New York, have lived here, continue to live here. You see that in Queens. Queens is like the home area of Mamdani anyways. You see that some up here as well. Mamdani outperformed. Cuomo was expected to take the bluer areas that he did, but to see this much gold or from Mamdani on Staten Island, which is a conservative Democrat, or honestly Trump conservative stronghold, these are incredible gains. You can see why Cuomo was like, actually, I don't want any more of the smoke. Please stop. I'm hurt. Don't ask me if I'm all right. I'm going to concede the night of, when Cuomo definitely expected to be able to make this so close they could eke it out. You saw all these articles that were like, hey, there were so many different, oh my gosh, there were so many different articles that came out saying ranked choice voting doesn't seem all that democratic to me. I'm a little bit worried about how this is turning out here. But anyways, we've got to get now to some of the reaction that people are already having. Representative Elise Stefanik, who's a Republican from New York, said posted this on social media in response. And this is how you can see some of the establishment just freaking out the idea of Zohran winning. So it says, TikTok, Kathy Hochul. We knew you were in full-blown panic mode as you frantically draft and sent out a congratulatory tweet to the anti-Semitic, jihadist, communist candidate you helped elect in your party's Democratic primary because of your silence, weakness, and ineptitude. You own this dangerous insanity and are incapable of defeating it. So next year, New Yorkers will defeat you to save our state. So here's one thing that we're gonna have to look out for as well, especially, is that Zohran Mamdani has won the Democratic Party primary. The Republicans are still gonna do every scaremongering tactic they can to change the mind. You're probably not gonna change the mind of Democratic primary voters, but if you just registered to vote and voted for Zohran, they're going to be trying to go for people going, oh, you just registered to vote, you got swept up in Zohran mania, turned out he's a scary Muslim communist antichrist. They said the same thing about Barack Obama. They would constantly say his name is Barack Hussein Obama to get rid of the fact that his mom's a white lady from Kansas. Right? Zohran Mamdani is as New York comes, frankly. And one of the reasons why this won't win, I'll explain in just a moment. But I think this is a losing strategy overall. More responses here. We got Laura Loomer. Not even, there is no subtlety left among these people. Laura Loomer says there will be another 9/11 in New York City and Zohran Mamdani will be to blame. What about when the first 9/11 happened in the city and Rudy Giuliani was there, you know, America's mayor. When that happened, everyone rallied around him, and like you still have Democrats who would refer to him as America's mayor because they were in New York in that time during 9/11, and they, you know, remember what that was like and that rallying behind the flag thing. Definitely happened because Rudy Giuliani is as white Italian New Yorker sounding as they come. But to say that the mayor of the city was to blame for a terrorist attack that was, you know, targeted against the entire United States. There are other cities that were involved in 9/11, mind you, for the actions of the United States, and if anything, Washington, D.C., again, just reeks of the kind of easy, simple, addictive misogyny. I mean, not misogyny in this case, but Islamophobia, rather, that comes from, you know, Laura Loomer is establishment. Elise Stefanik is establishment. Charlie Kirk, again, these are the people that Cenk wants to have a beer with. And, you know, there's even a little bit of fun here I'll get into. I can't help myself. But Charlie Kirk says, 24 years ago, a group of Muslims killed 2,753 people on 9/11. Now a Muslim socialist is on pace to run in New York City. Gee, I don't know. 80 years ago, you had a leader who killed millions of people under the guise of Germany first, Germany for Germans. Now you have, oh, and by the way, they say he was an atheist, but he was leaning into Christian fascism to get his work done. And you had a lot of Christian and Catholic fascists around the world, including in the United States. Look at Father John Coughlin, who were, you know, pumping this rhetoric up in the 1930s. Fast forward to today, and you have someone who is also arguably not even Christian, but using Christo-fascist rhetoric to gain in power, to say America for Americans, America first, and, you know, overly deploying the military and exercising his power to help kill tens of thousands, you know, could soon be millions of people when you look at all the ramifications of USAID being shut down. All the bombs that we're dropping and helping be dropped in places like Gaza, now Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria. But somehow Charlie Kirk focuses on the Muslim part and the religion part in this case for the mayoral race, and not, you know, the religion part for his guy. Again, Charlie Kirk's supposed to be the anti-war, let's just bring it back to America guy, but while Cenk Uygur will go, oh, he's anti-war, I like that, the next sentence to come out of Charlie Kirk's mouth will be, yeah, and Muslims are disgusting and dirty. Cenk still doesn't seem to get it by saying, do you get this? Makes no sense. Like, okay, first of all, I'm not going to read this because Cenk is addicted to doing long posts on Twitter. And I think if you have to post like this on Twitter, your point's just like not that good, left or right. But again, you can chase right-wing voters who will never want you, who will think you're icky because you're brown or because you're gender non-conforming or like any difference they don't like of you because you're not brown, blonde, and blue-eyed enough to work for his coalition. Y'all can keep rocking with that, or we can rock with actually winning. Now, let's remember that in addition to this, you also had Andrew Cuomo running ads that like accentuated Zohran Mamdani's beard even more. That's crazy. Like, of all the things, you're gonna like Photoshop AI, whatever, his beard to make him, I don't know, like look more Muslim, more scary. Just like put a turban on his head. Like, let's just go all the way here so we know what you're doing. And it's gonna work on a lot of people, but I want to get into, because I promised, the reasons why this is not going to work. So, or like this hasn't been working, and the reason why Zohran won, and how we can get even more Zohrans in the future. Okay. So, obviously, at number one, like there's hope, and that hope is a machine, and it is entropic. If you have a little bit of it, you can keep going. But here's the real first reason: ranked choice voting. We always think of this thing about the lesser of two evils when it comes to politics. And because of ranked choice voting, you didn't have to have that in this case. There were people who were going to vote for Brad Lander and they were going to stay voting for Brad Lander, and that wasn't going to change in any real sort of way. That can happen. But because of ranked choice voting, you're able to do what you generally do in ranked choice voting anyways. Now, I am a retired person who used to run campaigns, and by campaigns, I don't mean anything serious. I ran the campaigns for my college student government, which, because my college, UC Berkeley, is full of a bunch of tryhards who are, some of them are in the Democratic Party actively trying to make it worse. Some of them are in the Democratic Party actively trying to make it better. But it's a group of like tryhard 18, 19-year-olds who want to prove themselves out. And so we had a full campaign, and we had campaign finance rules, and we had a campaign ethics board we had to be aware of. There were all these different extra details, but it really did prepare you for the real world of campaigns. But these were tryhards. Anyways, so I'm really familiar with ranked choice voting. That's the way we would do ranked choice voting. And I was the campaign manager for a, at Berkeley, you kind of have a progressive party, a nearly socialist party, and then you have just like more communist, and then independents who are basically the right wing. So we had like a big slate of candidates. We had like 16, I'm not going to go into the details too much, but you had like a big slate of candidates, some running for positions in our like House government. And then we had 4 executive positions. So we had 4 candidates running for each of those 4, right? 1 each for those 4. And we knew the ranked choice voting system, especially in the, Senate House sort of thing. And that's the way we would get people to win, is we would pair people together and, hey, rank this person number 1, and then rank me number 2, or rank me number 1 and rank the person I'm endorsing number 2. That way, and you can get really strategic on the math with this, Brad Lander was a distant third at like 11% when Cuomo and Mamdani were in the mid 30%, right? So there was a point when Brad Lander was not going to win. Now, I think I overall on policies like Zohran Mamdani, but Brad Lander literally put his body on the line to make sure that undocumented immigrants in this country could get due process in the city of New York, and got roughed up by ICE thugs for that. So that boosts him up a lot of points to me. I can disagree with him on a lot of things, but that boosts him up on a lot of points to me. Another thing is how he, as a Jewish New Yorker, refused to, and someone running for mayor, refused to let latent Islamophobia within the city impact the coalition building that he had with Zohran Mamdani. So knowing electorally that Brad Lander was 11%, and there are people who were going to vote for him who really liked him, for him to make the case and say, hey, because we have ranked choice voting, you should consider Zohran Mamdani for number 2, because we both agree that we don't want Andrew Cuomo back in. We both agree on a relatively similar progressive agenda. There are some differences between the two. But that coalition building, rather than the crabs in a bucket mentality that you get from, any other type of politics, where you have the Democratic Party establishment candidate who is well-funded, who is backed by all of the, groups and unions that usually endorse the Democratic Party, versus an incumbent outsider who has grassroots support and energy, but isn't able to seal the deal when it comes to those big endorsements and that big money, because you have someone sucking all the energy out of the room, who doesn't actually stand up for that new energy in the party. And that's what you kind of get right now, to where you have some Democrats who will make it past the primary test of Democratic Party voters, but they won't make it to the general, because Democratic primary voters who vote for those types of establishment candidates are not the norm in society, and nowhere near close to the norm of those like non-voters or independents that you need to actually topple and get over a first past the post election. So what Zohran's doing is really difficult without ranked choice voting. And what Brad Lander did, which was great and honorable, and I hope Zohran hooks him up with some seat in his cabinet should Lander so want it. But this is the type of coalition building that we need to see in other races. Even if you don't have ranked choice voting, if you're all seeing the same polling and everyone wants to have the best sort of idea or mindset about their chances, But if you are running in a race and you see, okay, there's the candidate we all hate who is first place. There's another person who can beat him, but in order for us to beat that establishment candidate, we as the broad left, maybe someone's more environmentalist, maybe someone has like a stronger foreign policy stance, maybe someone is more economically minded and more into urbanism, right? Everyone has their own like extent to progressivism, especially when you have a bunch of political candidates. But for those political candidates to come together and come together as a slate where they're not necessarily saying who you endorse, but out of your 5 slots, you pick these 5 people. Or you're doing dual slate endorsements, rank me number 1, rank him number 2, rank me number 1, make him number 2. These sorts of things help. Just to make this a little bit broader, I'll give the example of Barbara Lee, who, she looks like an establishment Democrat. She is, a little bit more elderly, let's say. She used to be a House of Representatives, representative for Oakland, California, for the Democrats. And she ran for mayor of Oakland. I'm not going to get into that whole story, even though I want to. I have a whole different detour written for that maybe I'll get to one day. But I can wrap up a lot of the ideas in 2 minutes here and relate to Zohran. Barbara Lee, just for her claim to fame, she was the only person in the House to vote against the authorization to go to war in Iraq. She was the only person who stood up to that in 2003 when Republicans in office and in Congress, like in the executive branch, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, and in the House were pushing this war thing, beating the war drums, saying the same things about Barbara Lee, frankly, as they're saying about Mamdani. Oh, she's siding with the terrorist. Oh, she's Black. She's not really American. These things are not new under the sun. It's classic propaganda. Unfortunately, it works, but I think with younger generations who have seen this, it's working a lot less. So even though Barbara Lee was a little bit older and her opponent, Lauren Taylor, was a younger, Black man, Barbara Lee was the more progressive option. And because you had ranked choice voting, I'm not going to show you the maps here, but you also had a similar breakdown of the areas that were more working class and had some people who were new to the city who had been priced out of San Francisco. They were moving for Barbara Lee, and those other candidates that you had were able to, tell people to put Barbara Lee number 2 so that when redistribution happened, all of the big tech money and all the money from the suburban parts of Oakland, Piedmont area, it didn't work. It couldn't beat people power. And so ranked choice voting is really good. I think if you want to improve things in your municipality, in your city, in your state, the number one thing to do is ranked choice voting because it's not too political. You can get a lot of libertarians and right wingers on it, just on the board of, hey, we hate the 2-party system. Wouldn't you like to never feel like you have to vote for the lesser of 2 evils again? Wouldn't you like 5 choices and to know that you can vote your principal number 1, but your vote doesn't get quote unquote wasted because it will eventually go to either the winner or the runner up? That's a compelling thing. We should be pushing for that number 1. Number 2, once we get that, is that we should have this coalitional drive to not throw under your, allies. I mentioned number 2, like my number 1 was ranked choice voting is the things we can learn from Zohran. Number 2 is this progressive socialist coalition building that doesn't throw people under the bus and is smart about the electoral math, as I just explained right there. It can be done with Barbara Lee. Zohran Mamdani and Brad Lander held a clinic on it. And that's why, Zohran's lead was pretty good. And it looked like even if all of the number 2s went to Cuomo, it still wouldn't have been enough to give Cuomo the edge. But if it was closer, that Brad Lander X factor would have made the difference. And the fact that we all knew that Brad Lander X factor was waiting made the call easier to make because we all knew, okay, all of number 3's votes are going to go to number 2, and then there's not enough from the rest of the candidates, even if they all went for Cuomo, and those were unlikely to happen either, for Cuomo to eke it out. So he had to concede, and he had to concede early. Tail between the legs, all of that. We see too much of a crabs of a bucket mentality in a lot of different places, and we need to if socialists can endorse progressives, if progressives can endorse socialists, if we can not be so focused on the language of foreign policy, especially when we're talking about local mayoral races, and if people can come together on a human rights stance for what is right, then let's do less of the online left, which we've kind of seen like, oh, well, Zohran had to give up on Palestine in order to get Lander's endorsement. No, he didn't. Both Lander and Zohran, in their own different ways, were advocating for peace for Palestinians and, a democratic state and peace for Israelis. However that sounds, it sounds very reasonable, and it is very safe, of course, because you can't really convince people with this issue. But Zohran's not backing down on his principles. Brad Lander's not backing down on his principles. And not to speak for him, but he said this as well, he's also not backing down on his Jewish religion, his Jewish upbringing, his background. And so that is the type of coalition building we need to see more of. We can't let all these other different races happen in where you have two left of center Democrats running against an establishment Democrat, and they start bickering over US foreign policy. Or they start, going toe to toe and like make it an ugly race over economic policy. One wants to go a little bit further on the social spectrum than the other. You can make those points, you can have those out, but once you realize what the streets are saying and what people want, you've got to realize that it is better at this time, it is crucial at this time to go for the winner and who is going to be the anti-establishment winner on the left versus who is, this weird, frankly unproven idea of the best person to beat the Republican or the best person to win. Because it seems like every time we put up the quote unquote best person to win, they win barely or lose. They win barely and lose right after winning that election, or they just lose outright. And number three, and I've kind of been getting to this ultimately, and so number one, have hope. Actual number one, ranked choice voting matters. Number two, progressive socialist coalition building and getting rid of this crabs in a bucket mentality when it comes to electoral politics. And then how to create 10 more Zohran Mamdanis. Number three, have a ground game that starts early, meets constituents, and engages them online and offline to do groundwork for the campaign. And I want to emphasize that offline bit because the lines are so blurry between on and offline when we're talking about politics that you could be sitting somewhere in the country and you can think about, oh, I saw a lot of Zohran Mamdani on social media. He had a really good social media game. I liked his TikToks. That must be one of the ways he won. And that's not entirely untrue. But the way Zohran built the campaign, social media was the last piece of the pyramid, or however you want to think about it and visualize it. It was the last piece of the puzzle to put down. What Zohran did was start with a grassroots campaign. He announced it and made a big deal about it, I want to say in October of 2024. He was going to be doing this. He started knocking on doors. He had some videos. He had some good campaign video ideas, and that definitely helped get his name out there. And that helps get your name out there when you're knocking on doors and you're kind of considered to be a nobody, who are you? If you've at least seen those TikToks online before, then okay, you might be sort of familiar. If you've seen billboards or other things like that, okay, you have some familiarity there. But let's be clear, this is not a social media campaign built on, this was not a political campaign built on top of a social media campaign. It was the other way around. They did the politics first. They did the groundwork first. They did the community organizing and the building and reaching out to different groups and listening to what their needs are and what they want. And then there was a social media campaign on top of that about getting on subway takes, getting on all these other different shows, getting your message out there and getting to repeat it in the airwaves, all the way up to the Colbert Report. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert near the end, the eve of the election night. And then on top of that, it was an endorsement strategy. Okay, near the end, not in the beginning. There are a lot of people who are like, AOC is taking too long to endorse Zohran. This is a bad thing. Shut up. These are the only leftists who are winning elections right now. I think we can let them cook in saying that timing is everything, and the fact that AOC, Kai Ose, who's like a council person out here in like the Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights area of Brooklyn, Bernie Sanders, these other more left endorsements, it's good they came. It's good they didn't come like a minute later too, but they mean a lot more, and it's a lot harder to do like counter messaging against them from the right wing or even from like the Cuomo side if you're just hitting them with this barrage of, oh, now AOC's got their endorsement. Oh, now Bernie's got the endorsement. Oh, I know this guy. I like the endorsement. Oh, I know that comedian. He likes Zohran. Okay. Oh, my friends are posting about Zohran. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. Oh, there's this page for Zohran. Oh, there's my transit advocate friends are for Zohran. Oh, like building an organic moment, almost like I do a lot of marketing. It's like building a social media moment, building an event, and getting all those pieces together is a well-oiled, crafted machine. And there's pomp and circumstance to it, and it's very easy to get, bogged down by that. But the true thing that happened was he's not just getting influencers. He's getting influencers with regional pull in New York. Barbara Lee had one of the worst social media games of all time. Like, her people didn't know what it was doing. All of her videos were like Instagram lives where the first 5 minutes of people figuring out how to make the video work, and they would just never take them down. They would just like keep it and that'll be the election thing. The influencers for Barbara Lee's campaign were the Oakland, California, donde la vida no vale nada guy. If you're not from Oakland, you don't know what I'm talking about. If you are, you know. And that's not Subway takes. That's not some like huge social media following. They didn't have all the San Francisco tech pomp and circumstance to put behind that video or put behind that push. But what they did have were influencers who had their like ears and their eyes to the streets, to where, okay, if you see these influencers speaking about this political campaign, then people who actually live and struggle and fight in that city know not only about you, but, oh, this person has street credit. This person, tapped in, for better words. He's into the neighborhood. He is into the community. And that creates energy where people want to post about that, where people want to get to that. And so again, to recap, how do we create 10 more Zohran Mamdanis? Have a little bit of hope. Get ranked choice voting in your area. Once you have ranked choice voting, or even if you don't, make sure that there is a clear establishment versus anti-establishment coalition between the people who are running. It's all fun and games, but once you need to start consolidating, you need to realize who's the enemy, who's got all the money and the power in the race you're trying to topple, versus what's your best chance to push that in a different direction. And then number 4, have a ground game that starts early. Get recognized before you need that big role. If you're running for mayor, do what Brad Lander did, do what Kenneth Mejia is doing out in Los Angeles, and become the comptroller, become the finance guy, become the chief financial officer of your city or municipality, and figure out where the money is going and how it could be spent better, and make that clearer to the people in your city. And yeah, use online media as a weapon, use earned media as a tool, but it's about knocking on doors, addressing potholes, kissing babies, cutting ribbons. It's a lot about that, showing up in a community and saying that you'll be there, not just for the symbolic stuff, but for the struggles, for the anger, for the passion. I want to highlight a few last things here. Producer Sachi, who helped with this segment, also has a note for folks out there saying that, there are liberal voters out there who have been keeping tabs on things through like Occupy Democrats and other milquetoast resistance accounts. Those liberals will see 2 things after the Zohran Mamdani win. Dems will either try to shift their tactics out of fear of losing their electoral power, and they will embrace the AOC Zohran Mamdani. I think we can call this like Brooklyn Queens socialism that we've been seeing over the past 10 years kind of resonate and rise and prosper in New York. Democrats will either try to move to those tactics without scaring their donors too much, or they'll continue to appeal to right-wingers. They'll keep on making Zohran Mamdani's beard look bigger than it is. They'll keep on making him look browner than he is. You'll see all that Islamophobic rhetoric like they're doing with Gaza and Iran and like they're doing with Zohran himself. It's easy to call out Trump. It's the easiest thing to call out Trump, to quote Saatchi. It's too easy. So it's time to step out of your comfort zone and call out the system itself in which both parties profit from. You don't have an opposition party right now. A movement like Zohran's presents a future where you can. I'll repeat that last point. You don't have an opposition party right now, liberals, but a movement like Zohran's presents a future where you can. And yeah, like fighting within the Democratic Party is not something I fully agree on or like fully believe in. I think it's a fool's errand, but fighting the Democratic Party in such a way to where they can't ignore you, the way Zohran has done. Zohran didn't come up through the Democratic Party, but now that he's the Democratic Party nominee, and since he won by so many decisive votes, by such a decisive amount of votes, they can't do this David Hogg, oh, sorry, we got to do a recount. Oh, sorry, we forgot you didn't meet this diversity requirement. And just start like, you know. Zohran has now entered the establishment Democrats' home. He's starting to rearrange their furniture. He's putting his feet on top of the table. He's starting to get things how he wants them to because they can't ignore him. Once you become unignorable, then once you have a candidate or someone like that who can become unignorable to the Democratic Party establishment, he's in the House and they're going to have to fight to get him out. You're going to see one of two things, like Saatchi said. You're either going to see the Democrats show themselves to the establishment Democrats, rather, show themselves to be true Republicans in that they would rather see one of their own go. They'd rather lose a seat in the richest, most cosmopolitan city in the country. They'd rather lose a seat in the mayoralty there, blue area too. They'd rather lose that than have their house of cards topple, to have their rich donors less empowered, to have the scare tactics and political machinery that like a Cuomo would do, to have that shattered, to have their easy consultant jobs go away. We'll see what they actually care about. Because yeah, they'll have those material things happen to them, but these are still people who are smart and making six-figure salaries and frankly will benefit from a New York where there are protections for people who have jobs versus protections for companies who make money trying to steal jobs and take jobs away from people. And those companies that make money by taking jobs away from people, well, they support Democrats too. They support people like Andrew Cuomo. They support people like Eric Adams. They support people like Gavin Newsom. They support people like Lauren Taylor. They support people like, here's this thing in San Francisco. Together SF, which was a tech political action committee that was able to help put in this mayor who's like he's a Democrat on paper, but he's like a millionaire philanthropist and is basically in the back pockets of big tech. Big tech tells him to jump, he says how high. Big tech wanted a return to office mandate. The mayor of SF made all the city workers return to office in San Francisco, thinking that that would make downtown San Francisco better, not, making downtown San Francisco livable. So the only people who are there aren't out on the streets and engaging in, open drug use, which I'm not trying to demonize those people, but if we want to have a society where people who are in the throes of addiction get care and get treatment, and people who are in that position get homes, but also people who are just unhoused and can't afford to live and work in one of the most expensive cities in the country, being San Francisco or New York or Los Angeles or like any of them. A city that actually cares for all San Franciscans, all Oaklanders, all New Yorkers, etc., all Angelinos, is a system that's better than just doing what the CEOs want, which is making people come back to office. And then, those people will get lunch. And then, maybe 2 food trucks will do well until ICE raids those food trucks. And then, anyways, they're scared because already in San Francisco, just this week, Together SF, that PAC that has been pretty discredited in the area as being Democrats for Big Tech, has been rebranded as blueprints for a better SF, and it's still spending rich people's money to try to swing elections. It worked in San Francisco. It didn't work in Oakland across the bay because it's not built like that, right? If this was a Manhattan and the Bronx race in New York, it would have been a little bit different. But Brooklyn, Queens, and apparently Staten Island got a little bit more of that smoke. And they want to see a New York that works for more people and not just the few amount of people that's working for right now. Last thing I want to point out right now is that someone I'm looking for who is doing this very well is the LA City Controller, Kenneth Mejia. Now, he essentially has the job of Brad Lander out in New York, who cross-endorsed Zohran, helped him win. He's like the chief financial officer for the city. And what he's been doing, this isn't as polished as a Zohran video. This isn't as, perfect, but this is how a lot of people in LA are getting their information about the city budget, because we're not watching C-SPAN or we're not watching Spectrum One or whatever when they're doing the city council meetings. No one's paying attention to those Zooms, but there are a lot of people, especially millennials and Gen Z, who are Angelinos, who are paying attention to what Kenneth Mejia is talking about, because it speaks to the concerns that Angelinos have, and also his layers of transparency by showing how the city budget works. It gives you a way to still be, DSA minded and think about, okay, what about prosperity for all? What about real abundance for everybody in the city versus just abundance for, as it's been branded, for developers and entrepreneurs, right? But by coming at it from a finance perspective, they'll ask, oh, how do you pay for it? You can go, as a democratic socialist in Los Angeles, well, this is how they're paying for it right now, and we're getting bad alternatives. We're funding the police more and more and more, and somehow they're recruiting less and less and spending more and more resources. One of the biggest resources, results of spending in Los Angeles has to do with payouts the city has to make in settlements. Number one, by a country mile of who pays out those settlements, it is where that's coming from. So yeah, I'll play this here, just to give you an example of how this can work and how this can look, because I think Kenneth Mejia is running a clinic. And the next time there's a mayoral race up in LA, he is currently my favorite pick.
Hey everyone, this is Kenneth Mejia. On Friday, June 6, 2025, violent ICE raids took place in the city of Los Angeles, targeting workers at Home Depots and warehouses. These ICE raids have terrorized and traumatized our community as families were torn apart and people have been living in fear, afraid to go out even to work. Since then, protests against ICE have taken place almost daily. At the same time, the feds have sent 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines to surrounding areas in and around our city. As the city controller, the city's accountant, many of you wanted to know how much we've spent so far related to the city's response to the ongoing protests against ICE. The estimated preliminary cost so far through June 16 is $19.7 million. 87% of the total cost relates to the LAPD, totaling $17.2 million, and about $1.4 million relates to public property damage and cleanup. Of that amount, $86,000 relates to graffiti removal. The $19.7 million spent so far in the past week and a half does not include potential lawsuits or liability claims. I know many of you have asked about that, and to give you some context on lawsuits against the city of LA related to the police response, the city received 55 lawsuits for the 2020 protests, which included the murder of George Floyd. The city has since paid out $20 million, with 21 cases still open to be resolved. And it's still dollars since paid.
So I'll just go back here really fast. Just from the George Floyd protests, the city of LA has received 55 lawsuits, 28 of which had to be settled for a total of $13.1 million. And that included $3.75 million for a cop lacerating someone's finger, $1.3 million for a side bruise, $1.2 million for a head laceration, and $860,000 for a head injury. So Kenneth Mejia is saying it without saying it. When you give more money and resources to the police, it actually costs the city of Los Angeles because we end up having to pay out all these settlements for when the police act up. It's not an if, it's a when. So $13 million down the drain. That $13 million could have gone towards mental health care services. It could have gone towards drug rehabilitation. There's so many different things that could have gone to. And by the way, fingers would have been lacerated, heads would have been lacerated or injured, bruises wouldn't have happened. Hell, you can get even Machiavellian about it and would have saved some money on the weapons, the munitions you used, right? So this is a past example of ICE protests in, just in the middle of June, we're near the end of June. That drain on the resources of Los Angeles continues. And this is during a time when in the previous months, I'm not going to play this video because it's already going really long, but in the previous months, Kenneth Mejia had been talking about the city budget. He actually made this tool, or his office made this tool, where people could submit their own city budget and say, let's take this money from police and give it to mental health care services. Let's give it to homelessness services. Let's do all these other different things in the budget. And people were able to kind of vote the way they wanted their city to work through that budget. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if you had a mayor of your city that allowed citizens to give their take on how the city should spend their money with an app on their phone or an app they can visit on a website on their computer? That's transformative. That's a new way of doing politics. That's a way to make politics a lot more accessible to people. That's another way to make politics more of a conversation. I could see people at outings doing like, okay, let's talk about how we want to build our budget and let's submit our vote to the mayor and let's, make our voices heard. Usually you only get that power by giving the mayor millions of dollars. And Kenneth Mejia is making this accessible to Angelinos for free. Or, for the cost of paying for the comptroller's office, which we already do. So yeah, don't sleep on Kenneth Mejia when it comes to Los Angeles. You heard it here first. I'm the same person who shouted out LaMonica McIver, who was recently arrested at ICE protests in New Jersey. She's a junior congresswoman out there. So I pay attention to these younger faces in these areas across the country. And I know when they're on the peak of blowing up. I didn't catch Zohran because I'm not paying attention to New York City politics like that. Let's be real. No one in America is. Y'all New Yorkers are very full of yourselves. But like I said, despite that and embracing my new status as a, new New Yorker, I want to say congratulations to my fellow New Yorkers. I want to say good job. And I want to say to anyone else who's not in New York, let's have a little bit of hope today. Let's have a little bit of pep in our step. There's a lot of things going wrong. There's a lot of things he's going to fight for. Zohran Mamdani still needs to make it through the general election. He needs to survive his first term as mayor. Because being the mayor of a major city in Los Angeles, in America, let's be clear, being the mayor of a major city is signing up to have everyone hate you. All right? People who voted for Zohran are going to end up hating him or wishing he went further or saying he isn't going far enough or saying he went too far. They're going to say he's prioritizing this over that. It's going to be hell. Getting him elected and then, reelected again, if we even want that, is going to be new layers of hell we have not thought of. The Islamophobia, the bigotry is going to be out in full force. But we have more tools than ever. We have more hope than ever. And we have a better chance as, democratic socialists, as progressives, even as liberals, to prove a model of governance that works, that is popular, that gets votes, and is so popular that it insulates itself from big moneyed interests, big corporate interests that can so easily sneak their ways into big cities like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, but also get their tendrils in smaller cities and not only make our lives worse, but like Zohran was saying in his acceptance speech, they open the floodgates for the type of fascism that Donald Trump and many Republican legislatures and governors and lawmakers across the country are doing to people right now and will continue to do for 4 years, 8 years, etc. So, small glimmer of hope. Don't let people like me be too cynical about that. In fact, I'm not one of the cynical ones. I'm just trying to be realistic about what's to come forward and how we can get 10 more Zohran Mamdanis, because we, I think, can all agree we'll live in a better world if we've got 10 more Zohran Mamdanis. Let's just be real about this. Let's just be honest about how these things work. It's not magic. It's not rocket science. It is political strategy, and is one of the best ways to go about it. Anyways, I have to head out. Thank you very much for listening and watching to this. I've just been going on for an hour, but thank you everyone who's watching in chat. I see Pinkerbell, Soul Life, Grogmax, Looney Tunes, Long Con, had some folks in the beginning too, Snack Panther, Alexander, Chilling in RI. Shout out to everyone who is a subscriber on youtube.com/Dan from the internet. We're growing. Please help us continue doing that. Thank you for the YouTube channel members who are paying subscribers. Thank you to the Twitch members. Thank you to the members at Syndicate23.co. Lots more stuff coming to you soon. Hope you've been liking these Abrupt 2 lives in the morning. And yeah, until next time. Zohran says a similar thing, that the power is not in the hands of all these wealthy elites. And he's given a lot of Bernie Sanders there. But he always ends by saying, or he ended that speech largely by saying, the power is in the hands of New Yorkers and regular people who want to get their hands dirty and fight for their neighbors, their communities, and their families. Simply speaking, this is a detour, not necessarily a PowerPoint, but I'll end it a similar way. The power is within you to get ranked choice voting in your area, to support this progressive, socialist, liberal coalition building for strength, for power, for longevity, to learn how to use the internet as a tool and not let it get used on you like a weapon. And number 4, don't be afraid to have hope. Do all those things. We're going to get 10 more Zohrans, 100 more Zohrans. And the only thing we're waiting on is those who have the power. And in this case, it's you. Cheers. Have a good day. We'll see you for regular Power Report on Thursday. Peace.